point that you made about the Pharisees, there's a Gemara in Sota that talks about all the different types of Pharisees, and that some are, they describe them kind of like OCD people, pretty much. And they said the only, authentic or honest Pharisees are the ones who are Parish Me'ahava, Parish Me'ira. If they're
I think it uses the lashon of the makos of the Pharisees.
Yeah, makos prushim, mevale olam or mechale olam. There's different girsos that the ones that the knocking of the Pharisees destroy the world. So that means that these people that, like, let's say they're so careful they don't want to look at a woman, so that they walk into a wall because they weren't looking. Things like that, foolish types of, or also, people who want to show off, pretty much all the things that Jesus said about the Pharisees, Chazal said about the Pharisees. He wasn't being inconsistent there, with being possibly even, there's a book, I think it's called Jesus the Pharisee, that I never read the book, but I think it might be based on how in Matthew 19 and also in Mark 15, what he says about divorce, that's pretty much the opinion of Beit Shammai, in the Gemara in Gittin, in the Mishnah in Gittin, the end of Gittin.
Right, so, if a man divorces his wife for other than marital unfaithfulness, it's inappropriate. While Hillel says the opposite, that you could divorce her for anything.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
And my question is for Rabbi Asher. So from a political perspective, where does the Torah lean from a political perspective, in your opinion?
Well, being that the vast majority of religious individuals vote Republican, I would assume that means that unless they're living a lie and they're not living their religion out, but that has nothing to do with Christians. But I mean, Christians, Muslims, for some reason, like Muslims in America vote left, even though they're socially on the right. I think it leans to the right.
Well, why would that necessarily be the case? Why would Torah make a person more right-leaning? You think just the way it's set up? I mean, is there a correlation that could be made?
Just because we live and breathe. Virtually everything the Torah considers vile is something the left admires and tries to shove down your throat. Isn't that obvious?
Fair enough. I guess so. I guess I can agree with that.
No, for example, I feel the same way with the black community. I think blacks are very conservative socially, but for some reason they vote to the left. What do you mean?
I always understood Torah to sort of teach more libertarianism than conservatism.
If the Republican Party came out as anti-Semitic, you would switch to the opponent, right? If the Republican Party started making anti-Jewish laws like Nazi Germany, you'd switch parties, right?
Not necessarily. It depends why they're making these laws. For example, Nazi Germany was against Jews, not because Jews were religious, but because Jews were atheistical and the founders of communism. So we have to stop and think a second time before we just act. When I think that the left nowadays is a bigger threat to Jews and minorities than the right ever is. Heck, Donald Trump moved the embassy, or the embassy, the consulate, I can't remember, to Jerusalem. I don't hear the justification here.
I don't actually think Donald Trump is conservative, to be honest with you.
Oh, well. His party. I mean, forget about the man. I'm voting for the party.
I got you. Well, I think the party has also moved to the left. For example, Andrew Yang with the whole money to people is socialist. That's pure socialism. It's leftist.
Yeah, but Andrew Yang is not a Republican.
Yeah, true, but the Republicans adopted his platform of giving people money as income when they can't work.
When?
The whole
COVID-19
situation. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. All right.
You don't think so?
The Senate passed the bill, but it's because of the lockdown. I would have taken the approach of Sweden and not lock down. But if you're going to lock people down, how can you not give them some of their money back? I mean, clearly the government doesn't make money. The government distributes money. But instead of giving people money back, I think it would have been wiser to have them not pay their rent for that month. But heck, there's places like California that are still locked down, and that's not because of the right, that's because of the left. So it seems that the right are still more right than everyone else, even though in this time of crisis, I mean, something that we've never really experienced, and I'm not talking about the actual virus, but the hysteria around it. I think the right has still kept their head about it compared to those on the left.
So
Only because
dropping the money, you don't think dropping money out of helicopters is, I mean, even if it's, $1 billion, $10 billion, you're attaching a number to it. I think the whole thing is leftist.
That's not what I'm saying. Compared to how far left the modern day left has actually moved, the right is still way more rational and still holding true to their principles. But the best of the enemy, the better here. I believe that my party is a stupid party, and I think that the other party is the evil party. So I'd rather pick.
I think both are stupid and evil. I'm an independent.
And if you vote independent, you're just going to ensure that the left-wing party wins. We have to live in reality.
I'm independent too, but I usually tend to vote either Democrat or Republican.
Right, because you want your vote to count.
I think that's the problem, is that these two parties are entrenched in, and they cover such a broad base on both ends that it's not like a system where Israel is parliamentary, where every person's voice is pretty much heard and can participate in the government. You know what I mean?
In a 29-party system, you think that makes more sense?
Well, I think it does, actually. I mean, I can defend these views, but I don't really turn it into a...
No, I'm saying, this is how Hitler got elected, because the government is so split. It doesn't matter necessarily about a majority vote. As much as the Electoral College has influence in our society, it's still basically the majority rules to a certain extent. Those of us who are religious know which party promotes true religion in general. I mean, real religion, whether it's Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, and it's not the left. People on the right are religious. This is why, for the nomenclature is religious right, not religious left.
Should we use our power to vote based on Torah? Should we go out to the polls and base it on?
Absolutely. However, this is a democracy. People have the right to vote any way they want, and a society could point in that direction, and we have to acknowledge and accept their vote. This is the problem I have with people canceling out the president that was democratically elected just because they don't like him. The Republicans didn't try to do that, or the vast majority of Republicans didn't try to do that when Obama won. That's the issue. Yes, these laws in terms of not allowing a witch to live, putting people to death by Torah standards, only really applies in the land of Israel. And this is something that groups like Muslims pervert, because their caliphate is worldwide. So they try to apply certain principles globally, and this is why they're viewed as primitive. It seems that God first wants to win people over to the good news that he gave you a higher standard to aspire to, but that never really expanded outside of the borders of Israel, and the borders of Israel shrunk from the initial measurements that were given to Abraham. So it shows how good that vision is going. But it seems that God was too busy trying to instill people with the philosophy, i.e. the Jewish people, to slowly spread that philosophy to the rest of the world, but by little increments, by evolution, not revolution.
Do you think Christianity was part of that spread?
Do I think that God used Christianity to spread Judaism?
Yes.
I'm not of the opinion that everything that happens in this world, that God's involved with it. I do believe that it was part of the spread. I don't think that God caused it to be so. The Jews caused it to be so. The Jews, for not doing their part, caused Islam and Christianity to really pick up the slack. And this is why even the Rambam finds admirable, redeemable qualities in both Christianity and Islam. Although, in terms of minut and kafira and all this stuff, he finds nothing. For the next time that someone says it's better for a Jew to be an atheist than a Christian.
That was a heated discussion a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked the question because it makes me wonder, because, Christianity and Judaism are very similar. And because, obviously Christianity started at it from Judaism. And over time, of course, it became what it is today. But now you have, I guess, for lack of a better term, a wave of Christians that are dropping JC and coming to Torah. So it kind of makes me wonder if it's all related.
I think a lot of people see that. What's your take on that, Rav? Do you see that as a way just to lead you to the end?
I take a more deistic approach to Judaism, and I don't think anyone has ever made this combination of deism and Judaism. I think God gave us the Torah and really just took a step back, and he expects us to better this world with the tools he's given us. But to think that he's involved and he makes every decision that happens, I am not of that philosophy.
So it's Judaism, Jew deism, instead of Judaism.
Maybe, right.
I mean, I'm not implying that God had a hand in it, but you mentioned the spreading of Torah, and I've always wondered that myself. Was Christianity a part of that, like the spread of Torah? Because it is very similar to Judaism, and you do have a lot of former Christians that essentially become Jews. So it kind of just makes me wonder.
I don't think Christianity had a role in making Jews more religious, but it did have a role in sensitizing humanity. I think that's really what we should be talking about. Now, fast forward to today, I think that counter-missionaries online have a higher success rate in converting Christians to Judaism than they do in converting secular Jews to Judaism, to Orthodox Judaism. You said there's 14 million Jews in the world. That's 14 million ethnic Jews, or even converts, I guess, could be included in that group. But from that group, less than 10% are religious. So it doesn't speak well for God's ambassadors on earth when they have such a low rate of religiosity. I always say better a religious Christian than a secular anything, because it's easier for me to convince someone who already believes in the Bible to start keeping Torah than someone who actively fights against God. The notion of a mumar lechachis, in Shulchan Aruch it says that this is someone who already has a status of a Gentile, someone who is angry against God, who fights against God, and that's really the role of every atheist. Not every agnostic, whether he's pessimistic or optimistic, but an atheist actively makes this declaration that there is no God. So to think it's better that someone remain that than to enter a Bible-believing belief system, it seems absurd to me.
I hear what you're saying, but if, say, okay, so 2 million Jews are pious out of the 14 million, let's just say. So what does that say about the Torah as far as spreading? Because if the goal is to be Torah observant, but there's only 2 million, what does that really say about the Torah? You know what I mean? Like, is the plan or the mission not working?
The vast majority of Jews don't walk around thinking they have a mission to spread Torah to the world. That's what I tell you. But that I know of, there's no other rabbi who teaches this. The vast majority of rabbis teach that their job is to make other Jews religious, when that's also something new. That's something that Chabad started about 100 years ago. Before that, the average Jew, at least in the Middle Ages, thought that the goal was to survive. That's it. And to take care of other religious Jews. Now, my opinion is that the rabbis in the Talmud, the rabbis in the Mishnah, and even in the times of the Middle Ages, felt that there's strength in numbers, and why wouldn't we try to convert and encourage people to become Jewish if we wouldn't be killed for doing it? So I believe it was really after the rise of Kabbalah that people started to look inward and remain looking inward. And it wasn't until after Chabad that they felt that it's time to encourage ethnic Jews to become more religious because they're special and they're better candidates than Gentiles because of this supposed Jewish soul that Kabbalah tells us exists. But yeah, the average Jew doesn't walk around feeling that he has any purpose on this planet other than to remain Jewish and to survive. But survival is not a virtue in the Bible.
I don't think just because a Jew isn't from, to use a Yiddish term, doesn't mean that they're they threw off the yoke of Torah. I mean, I know a lot of secular Jews. I mean, they'll still have a Brit Milah for their baby boy 8 days. They'll still have a bar mitzvah. They're still very much proud to be a Jew, proud to be a Yid. they're part of the community. Maybe they're not hardcore about it. Maybe they're not wearing like black slacks and a big gold Borsalino hat, but they're still doing Torah mitzvahs and to their capability. No, don't you think? I mean, to throw them off completely too it's not exactly,
I wouldn't consider them secular then. I would consider them more traditional. I'm talking about people who
you say people like Barbara Streisand. You're saying?
Oh well, for sure. But I mean, people who identify as unaffiliated. I'm not saying conservative Jews, for sure not.
Because that's a big chunk. That's a big number. Then it's more people there. It's not 14 million Jews in the world. Then
But the last poll that I heard, it was this website called simpletoremember.com, and it cited a poll that 54% of born Jews identify as atheist. Now, from that group, we have Holocaust survivors, people who are 70 plus, who are still semi-traditional, who grew up in homes where perhaps they drove on the Sabbath, but they got together with family and they had some semblance of what it meant to be Jewish. I'm not really including those people, although those people are the ones who give birth to atheists, because they don't know Judaism enough to hand it over to their children. And
so you don't think that, Chabad would say that a Rasha Jew is like a pomegranate, that any moment they can just burst out with many mitzvahs inside of them. It's just there.
Oh, but that's a problem then. There's a huge problem to say that an irreligious individual has more potential than another irreligious individual just because of who his grandmother may have been.
I seen it, Rav. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I could have swore the guy is like, a God-hating atheist like Barbara Streisand, and then one day there's just something happens and he's just an Eved Hashem. He's Eved Hashem the next day.
Do you think that's as likely to happen with a Gentile as it is with an ethnic Jew?
Sure, I think that happened with a non-Jew, that they become more religious. But we're talking about within the confines.
The vast majority of people listening to this show right now are not Jewish, and they love Torah and will do anything to be on God's side. I can't say that.
They should convert then. They should definitely convert.
But going back to the idea of spreading Torah, it just makes me wonder, like, does God care whether or not? I mean, obviously he doesn't care if a person is Jewish, I think what he cares about is if they're Torah observant to the best of their ability, and that can include Christians, can it not?
Absolutely.
So it kind of makes me wonder, like, if Christianity is a part of that spread of Torah, and even Islam, we can make that argument.
No, wait, hold on. There's gradations of holiness for sure. Building Israel, joining Israel, circumcising yourself, being part of the covenant, being part of the people, is clearly being in the palace, is being closer to God than someone who believes that a man is God incarnate.
I'm not talking about the beliefs. I'm really speaking to the ethics, because I know that's your thing.
No, for sure. But the ethics, without things that uphold and secure the ethics, which is the ceremony, really determines how long you're going to remain religious. The reason we have a Passover Seder is we're commanded to tell the story of how God loved us so much that he brought us out of Egypt. Right? We're solidifying this message in the minds of our children. It's hard to do that if you only have ethics alone, because eventually you're going to forget where those ethics come from. And I praise Christians all the time for all the mitzvot they keep, whether they acknowledge them or not. But I think eventually their philosophy is going to end up catching up with them. If they don't have a firm ground in Torah, I mean, real Torah, I'm not saying that they're keeping mitzvot because Jesus kept mitzvot. No, they're keeping mitzvot because God said to keep mitzvot, right? Your source is Torah. Your source is in Jesus. Jesus, I believe, was a kosher Jew. He kept Torah. His believers went and they built a religion around what they thought he meant, or based off of the teachings of Paul. But I won't deny that ideology will eventually catch up with them. The only long-lasting path is the path of Orthodox Judaism or observant Judaism. I don't even like word.
So you would say a big chunk of this has to be the stories. I mean, having the Pesach Seder and telling stories, it plays a crucial role. So I mean, if a person I would say, I know the word is used a lot today, had the privilege of being at least raised from a Jewish mother and a Jewish family, that they somehow will get to the truth quicker, right? Even if they have if they're stuck in atheism for a while.
I think it's worse. I think those people should be held in higher contempt because they know the truth, they have the tools, and
they choose not to.
Absolutely, and they trample upon it. That while a Gentile,
they have all this goyish schmush. That the Bible's fake. Moses never existed. Big Bang. I mean, even the average Jew in America and Europe, they're bombarded with so much garbage, mishigash out there. I mean, can you blame them if they're born and raised into a household where they hate God from but they're Jewish? It's kind of a weird thing.
But last I heard,
the
bulk of atheistical movements were founded by Jews.
Yeah, very, very true. Karl Marx,
right? Karl Marx is right.
Son of a rabbi. Son of a rabbi.
Well, not just that. With the Frankfurt School, like if those who know what I'm speaking about,
sure.
Left-wing professors, the vast majority of notable atheists in the world are Jewish. Christopher Hitchens, Carl Sagan, Sam Harris. I mean, this is not a coincidence to say that they come to these conclusions because their thinking has been tainted by Gentiles, I think, is to be dishonest.
You think so?
I mean,
but that's a goyish thing.
Remember, Stalin was a son of a. He went to seminary for a little bit, so he wasn't Jewish. There's Pol Pot, Mao Zedong. It's not just
Stalin,
a Jewish thing.
Like Stalin wasn't the head of the ideology, well, Lenin was.
Right. He took over. Yeah.
I mean, Stalin actually became an anti-Semite, even though his 3 wives were all Jewish, and he put his brother-in-law in charge of the Cheka, which killed 7 million Ukrainians. And some people say that he also had Jewish blood, even though he trained to be a priest. But the gulags were founded by Jews, Maxim Berman, Naftali Frankel, and that's what the concentration camps were modeled after. People hate Jews in America nowadays, not because they wrap tefillin on their arms or they keep Shabbat. No, they hate Jews because of all the schmutz that comes out of the university. The left-wing media is predominantly Jewish. I mean, how can we deny it? 80% of Jews vote left.
It's true. True.
That's a fact. Although there are many influential Jews on the right, Mark Levin, Dennis Prager, Michael Medved, to say that Jews have an equal role in both sides politically is not true.